The first thing we'll start with are the pros and cons of the model that we had to choose, the spiral model. Some of the pros are that it does allow the requirements to change because as it kind of spins, you can kind of keep adding to the requirements, and then it kind of just goes on and on. Another good thing about it is that it does have a whole separate section checking out the risk factor of it. So the good thing about that is that like there's a lot of emphasis on the risks, so you don't have to worry about anything kind of coming back at you. Like, I guess kind of the problems maybe legally or anything like that. And then the nice thing is that there's a lot of system interaction with the kind of evaluation and testing and all that kind of stuff in the final phase before you end up moving back to the requirements. Some of the cons though with the spiral model is that it can seem never ending, because if you keep adding to it, then you kind of keep having to alter things over time. It can just seem to the point where it's like you don't see an end. It could also create unnecessary costs depending on, I guess, if you're doing all these kind of steps for something that's like very basic, so you wouldn't want to use this for like a smaller project ultimately, is what it seems. And then also the pro about risk is also sometimes a con, because if like you have to do a lot of what's the word? Like you need a lot of pretty much like experts or people who know what they're talking about when it comes to checking out the risk, because if not, then it's just kind of just a bunch of people kind of checking it out, and it's like, how accurate could it be? So at the same time, you definitely want people who know what they're doing to be the ones analyzing the risk. The model I chose to go along with it was the incremental model. Some of the pros with that is that each go around has its own kind of system release, and it's the nice thing about that, it's kind of seems standalone. So while it can be part of the whole, it's the standalone feature of it. It appears kind of standalone, so it can kind of just operate by itself without kind of the other things at times. Another one of the pros are the requirements are always consistent, because after each kind of go through, it goes right back to the same requirements over and over again. So you're never like kind of wandering off from ultimately the requirements. And then the nice thing along with the spiral model is that there is also a section for immediate feedback for like evaluation and people kind of just seeing whether they liked it or disliked it, or I guess ultimately how it's going. Some of the cons though with it are that it needs to be well thought out, because it's more of an overall kind of thing, so you have to see from like a bigger picture. So that way, you see an endpoint, and then you just know you're hitting it in this point, and that point, all the way to the very end. Another one of the cons is that the requirements ultimately stay the same for the most part. I mean, even though there's evaluation and you can get feedback and stuff like that, the way it kind of seems that there's not really kind of, like I guess you could kind of add ultimately to requirements. I mean, it's not saying they definitely couldn't, but I mean, how it goes is that it's always just hitting the same requirements over and over again. There's not really like a true kind of step to be like, all right, this one we have more requirements, readjust and kind of go from there. It's kind of just always hitting the same ones. And then since, each kind of phase can kind of seem individual and standalone, it might sometimes appear that it's not overall whole and together. Like it's all kind of just their own kind of like patches of maybe a quote together. The comparison between the spiral and the incremental model. I chose the incremental model because it seemed like with some of the other ones, they were very just, you go through kind of once and then that's kind of it. It didn't seem like they were part of worked for a larger project ultimately, like with Agile, Waterfall, things like that. It's kind of like, it just starts there, kind of trickles down with incremental. It kind of seemed like there was just, you have to think about everything overall, and then you have to kind of get all the requirements you think you need together, and then you have to kind of just, ultimately start the project. And it seemed like it was just better for something that when I was reading, I was like, I'm not sure what I'm reading, so I had to read a lot. So, the nice thing about the incremental model is that there are individual goals. There's definitely a thing where like if, in this situation with the way I ended up kind of taking it, if you can separate everything kind of individually by itself. So the beauty of that is that like the incremental model did help with that. So it kind of made everything kind of seem standalone, because when I was putting it together, it was like, okay, it seems like it could kind of go, start individually. The nice thing about the spiral model is that it helps with the overall goal. So you can keep adding to the requirements, and it kind of keeps changing over time. So the nice thing about it is that it did help with a larger kind of project to just kind of start observing it in general. When I was going through the RFQ and then the RFQ SOW, I was looking through everything. And it seemed like these were the main kind of requirements and objectives from a very kind of general and overall standpoint. They wanted to tackle the communication gaps between minority subgroups. They wanted to look at the data availability with minority subgroups who have diabetes. Sort of the first communication thing. Minority subgroups who have diabetes or are at risk of getting diabetes, along with their medication. And then also finding out the medication importance and trying to see whether, trying to get more information on pretty much specific minority subgroups and what medications might or might not work when it comes to diabetes. Just some little bit of stats that I have. This is from 2017. The United States has 240 million Facebook users. We're only 1 million behind, roughly 1 million behind India. As for which social media sites are being used compared to the other ones, Facebook seems to overall be dominating the rest of them, percentage-wise per internet users who are adults. I wasn't able to find any. Going through a lot of these kind of statistics, I had a little bit of difficulty finding as much information on Asian Americans and Alaskan natives and Hawaiian natives and stuff like that was a little more difficult to find. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to find as much information. But as you can see, Facebook's the dominating social media site. With this, I compared the risk of the diabetes risk with the amount of adult internet users and the amount of them who are also using, the percentage of them who are also using Facebook. I wasn't able to get the amount of internet users from American Indians / Alaska Natives. That was very difficult, but at the same time, it seems like with actual American Indians or Natives, they're usually in some sort of area where there probably aren't going to be as many towers, so internet access seems kind of dim. But in general, there's also with Facebook users, one that's an overall that I ended up having to put together, because also that was unbelievably difficult to find as well. So what I did with that, why it's at 74%, is I took the amount of people in the United States and then went with that against the amount of actual Facebook users, and then that ended up giving me roughly 74% of people. So it's kind of just a rough estimate of, I guess, all Facebook users. With the spiral model and how I applied it to the RFQ, the way I set up the spiral model had 4 different quadrants. It had the objectives, the risk, the design, and then the evaluation in that order. With both of the situations, with spiral model and the incremental model, I tried to, I guess, come up with ways to increase just overall communication and awareness of, I guess, ultimately the problem, and I guess talking about medication, what's working, what isn't working, just ultimately kind of get more of a dialogue going. So the first phase I decided to come up with, I kind of cruised around Facebook for a while, and there were a lot of diabetes pages, but a lot of the more official ones kind of just seemed like they were one giant advertisement. To be like, look at how great we are, we try, but we're not actually actively kind of doing anything. The whole kind of, kind of just promoting how great you are, but not actually being great. Not saying that they might not be doing anything, but at the same time, it's really better to just kind of have a situation where, you're actually kind of trying, even on such a website or such a, I guess, social media site where everybody just kind of comments and complains anyways. So you think you kind of want to use that to your advantage. So that was kind of my plan going into both of the models, since ultimately I'm trying to reach that goal, because both the models are working on the same type of information. So I'm kind of just applying it to both, ultimately the same kind of way. With the first phase, I decided to come with a Facebook page, and instead of just kind of separating it by minorities, like having one just for Blacks, Latinos in the United States, Latinos that are like Hispanic or English and then Hispanic, the more you kind of like separate it, the more it kind of seems like it could be watered down, and then you're just not really kind of getting it, because not everybody's going to want to say you're Black and Latino. You're not really going to just want to just start jumping back and forth between pages. So it seemed like it made the most sense to just have everybody complaining on one page, kind of just talk and ultimately have everything there, so somebody can be like, well, I think this has worked for me, and then stuff like that. So ultimately the first phase was creating a phase, that was the main objective for that one. The risk was that no one would comment, but at the same time, once you create it, you kind of start advertising it and stuff like that, kind of sharing it, promoting it over time. Obviously nothing's going to happen immediately, so you kind of just want things to kind of happen steadily. The design would obviously just making it look official, not making it look janky, making everything kind of look like it's made by people who know what they're doing. And then ultimately the evaluation is just kind of seeing initially how many people are kind of commenting, posting, kind of showing stuff like that, because they can always comment on something that like the actual page is posting. They can always make comments on the page, and then other people can go to that section as well. So there's a lot of different ways people can kind of ultimately tackle it. The second phase is to incorporate the American Diabetes Association support community that they have on their website. They have a lot of information about, they have their own little kind of section where people like who are at risk of diabetes or have diabetes can like create a page, create like their own kind of thing, kind of log in and comment as well. And it seems like they're like other actual or official people who are commenting on that as well, like within the website. So I have that. So I wanted to create kind of posts with links that are kind of sending them over to that page as well. That way it can increase community. That way, you know, they can talk to each other on Facebook, and then at the same time they can also go to the ADA website and try to get more like official information from people who like actually know what they're doing. Obviously, if that's the objective, the risk is that also no one will click on the link. But I mean, hopefully over time, as people kind of see, like once people kind of, you can obviously monitor the clicks and links and stuff like that. So kind of just checking to see hopefully that people click on it over time. The design making the post look good. I mean, actually making it look like it's not just like some random hyperlink, a couple words, and then nothing else. Is that, you know, obviously just from a marketing aspect, you know, you always want posts to still look official. And then the evaluation, just kind of seeing how many people are actually going over to that, you know, website, and then also trying to find out the membership increase on site. The final phase would be creating more posts to lead them to the American Diabetes Association minority pages that they have, because they have ones for Latinos, Asian American, and Alaska Natives, and Hawaiian Natives, and then, you know, the African American community. They have whole different sections with that lead to like these own kind of like online programs that are going on, or the kind of more interactive things, like besides just kind of talking about it. And then also leading them to the ADA local offices, because there are 76 American Diabetes Association offices in the United States. So it seemed like it made the most sense to kind of ultimately, if they're like near one, you know, obviously not everybody's going on like commute a really long way, but at the same time, if you're actually kind of close to one, it makes the most sense to kind of at least visit there and be like, hey, what can I do? Maybe I don't know anything. Maybe I know something, you know, just kind of trying to ultimately find out more information. That's the spiral model I came, you know, just kind of just from a visual standpoint. Everything kind of talked about ultimately beforehand. The incremental model, I applied that to RFQ. The phases are still the same, but I'll just go through the actual way I'm hit the four different things that I have. Ultimately, they're all going through the requirements. I found a lot of different finding out the design of the incremental model and trying to figure that out, like the official way. That kind of went for a little bit. Like it kind of just kept clicking and clicking, and because some of them had like, you know, like 5 or 6 different things, and then some would be like, no, just say these 3 points and you're fine. And it's like a lot of them kind of just ultimately seemed repetitive. And with the longer ones, with like multiple, like 5 or 6 or 7 different things, it seemed like it was probably for something that's like a legitimately like really large project where like they're like teams and different, you know, working different things. And it just seemed like it was kind of in that case. So I ultimately just decided with these 4 here, ultimately every time they're hitting their requirements, you can always update that. And then actually developing I guess ultimately what you kind of wanted to do in this situation, and then designing that, and then ultimately releasing it to be tested before you end up going back to the requirements. So obviously first phase is going through all the requirements of, you know, increasing communication about diabetes and diabetes medication within minority subgroups, and then developing the Facebook page to kind of have lead people towards that to kind of communicate, and then ultimately design the page, make it look good, and then testing it out and seeing how many, I guess, clicks and likes and follows you're ultimately getting. With the second phase with ADA support community, going through those same requirements, developing posts that look official, look proper, that send you actually to the ADA support community page, and then designing those, making them look good, and then ultimately testing them out, posting them over and over again. Obviously not like back to back to back, you always kind of want to space it out. And you can always go through the situation where you see the best times to actually post things when people are most looking at Facebook for certain things like that. And then the final phase would be, you know, the ADA minority page, and kind of sending minorities to different to their own respective pages on the ADA support site or ADA website, and then to the local offices if they're nearby. Kind of just letting them know where the local offices are, because we can always send links, be like, because you could go to the website and it's like type in your zip code or something like that, and then it actually just actually sends you to the page with that's nearest to you. Like so when I typed in mine, it sent me to Cleveland. So there's I think Cleveland, Columbus, and Cincinnati. So. And this is the incremental model I designed.
Can you go back to that?
Sure. Somehow. Oh, there we go. Since it seems like with an incremental model, they can kind of function on their own. Ultimately, I don't really have anything going back from deployment back to requirements, since, obviously they're just three different things that are going through the requirements, and then any of their own respective things that are being deployed. But obviously, since it's all more of an online presence and kind of communication and all, like even though everything's kind of functioning by itself, it's still ultimately kind of whole. Ultimately just increasing online communication between that. So obviously being able to data mine, do whatever I guess you like with that.
Is that it?
Yeah. Oh no, I saw one more page.
Okay, yes. Yeah.
Just the final page. With a model recommendation for smaller projects, I'd probably say the incremental model, because if it's a smaller project, you can you see the beginning, you know where you're ending. Like there's not really going to be too much that you really have to add into it where it's going to start causing major problems. So for any sort of smaller project, I'd probably recommend the incremental model. But in general, I like the spiral model. I like that I was able to keep adding to the requirements. And not every situation is going to be a point where you can release it kind of by itself, but it can function standalone. So that might not always be the case. It might just be a bigger kind of picture where everything really does rely on one another, more or less. So I'd probably recommend the spiral model in general, or for at least a larger project. Thank you. And does anybody have any questions?
I mean, I have a couple for you right off the thing. Okay, couple points. So you're recommending the incremental model would you personally use in this situation if you're comparing the two? And I didn't want you, as a part of this project, to just kind of give an arbitrary thing. I want you to think about something that you would personally adopt after having looked at it. So
like how if I had
yes.
actually been like, this is mine, I'm doing.
Yeah.
In this situation, I definitely use the spiral model.
Yeah. Okay.
Because obviously at some point in time I could have came up with my ideas, and then if it were part of me I think we should go this direction or do that. In an incremental model, it doesn't seem like I'd probably be able to kind of completely readjust everything. So I probably would have it would have been better to kind of change the requirements in the spiral model. And they'd be like, all right, well, we'll just hit it in this turn and that turn.
Okay. So like also another thing, you said some of the stuff was incredibly difficult to come up with, right?
Some of the stats the stats where I'm like, hey Facebook, how many people claim to be Asian American on the site? And our users. They're like, well, 50% of them do this, and be like, cool, great, you got a number? And they're like, nope, every time. We didn't actually speak, but every time I tried to Google something, I clicked a lot.
So keep this in mind.
Somebody else found it.
Keep this in mind, class. This is a real the RFQ that you guys are looking at. That's real. And companies in the United States have actually applied and answered this. So if you were so inclined, you might have tried to find out who those companies were and what their responses were, right? Because some of that stuff is already out there and it's available. So that would have been another strategy for those of you that were working with us to try to see what the people actually do. So as you're looking at how hard and how difficult some of this stuff was, that's a reality.
Yeah.
American companies, and I don't think they would allow any international companies to try to solve this problem. They had to actually do this. My group was one of the, I'm a subgroup on one